Hi, thank you so much for joining me in the Louie file. Today I'm going to share something with you based on one verse, really. I mean, I got lots of verses, of course, to make the point I'm trying to make. But if you have a Bible, if you want to join me and follow along, we're going to start in Matthew 11. It's going to be primarily based in verse 12. Matthew 11 verse 12. I'll just read this and then we'll see where we go with it. Matthew 11:12 says, Jesus speaking, from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and violent men take it by force. Wow, this has always been somewhat of a obscure or it could even be puzzling of a verse that Jesus makes such a statement. But in the context that he makes it, John the Baptist had come preaching repentance in the wilderness, and crowds of people had been coming out there to see and hear what he had to say. And Jesus is making a case here about the aggression by which people enter into the kingdom. Now, when you first look at this, you think the kingdom is suffering violence, and the violent take it by force. Well, the kingdom suffering violence, and the violent take it by force. What exactly is he talking about here? All right, well, the first thing I do as a Bible teacher, I look up words. So the first thing is the word violent. Violent here in the New Testament, of course, is Greek. If you look up the definition of this word, you'll see it says a forcer. Energetic, to force, i.e. to crowd oneself into, to be seized. So it conjures up this picture of a big, massive amount of people pressing their way into the kingdom aggressively. I don't think in any way Jesus is advocating physical violence. When he was standing in front of Pilate, let's look at that real quick. In John, Gospel of John, I think it's verse 9 or chapter 19. We'll see when we get there. John, this one's not written down, of course. I'm winging it already. John 19. John 18. Verse 35 and 36. Pilate answered, I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priest delivered you to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm. It's not of this earth. It's not a physical place per se. Jesus is saying, look, if I was an earthly king, then my subjects would be pulling out their swords fighting right now, but they're not. So he's trying to awaken Pilate to this idea of this, what to him at this point was an invisible kingdom. All right, I got a few examples in the New Testament about what I think clears this up, or at least makes some sense of this. Look with me in Mark 5. Mark chapter 5, verse 24 through 34. I got lots of verses today, but I want to set the whole context. Mark 5, 24 through 34. So it says, and he went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. A woman who had had a hemorrhage for 12 years and had endured much at the hands of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was not helped at all, but rather had grown worse. After hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his cloak. For she thought, if I just touch his garments, I will get well. Immediately the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Immediately Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power proceeding from him had gone forth, turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see the woman who had done this. But the woman, fearing and trembling, aware of what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." While he was still speaking in a synagogue, okay, I'm going to stop there. So the woman pressed through the crowd. She violently, aggressively pushed through this crowd of people to get to the kingdom, to get to the healing, to get to Jesus' garment. She was taking it. She was not taking no for an answer. She was going to get healed. She had to. She had no other option. Now look in Matthew 15. Here's another amazing, great story. Matthew 15, 21 through 28. Jesus went away from there and withdrew into the district of Tyre and Sidon. And a Canaanite woman, this is important, a Canaanite woman, this is not a Jewish woman, from that region came out and began to cry out, saying, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is cruelly demon-possessed." But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and implored him, saying, "Send her away, because she keeps shouting at us." But he answered and said, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and began to bow down before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered and said, "It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she said, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs feed on the crumbs which fall from their master's table." Then Jesus said to her, "O woman, your faith is great. It shall be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed at once. All right, so Jesus is saying the kingdom is suffering violence, the violent take it by force. The woman with the issue of blood pressed through the crowd. She was not going to take no for an answer. She was going to get well that day by touching Jesus. This woman here in Matthew 15 was not a Jew. And in fact, Jesus, the Jews, now I'm not trying to stir up any kind of racial tension. I mean, I don't really have to. It was already there. The Jews looked at the Gentiles as dogs. And this right here proves it. Jesus even related this in that way. He said, look, the children, I came to the lost sheep of Israel. I came to get Israel saved. And I can't take what I've brought for them and give it to dogs. I mean, he pretty much just insulted this woman. But she didn't take it. She's like, that just went right by her. She's like, but the dogs eat the crumbs that's dropped from the table. Give me something. I need something. My daughter is possessed. So she pressed through violently. She was not going to take no for an answer. She did it aggressively. I've often said that the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, death, burial, and resurrection, is for the desperate. He invites all of us who are weary and heavy laden to come to him and find rest. But you know what? You won't need that rest. You won't even be looking for it if you're not weary. And you won't be weary if you're not forcefully just saying, I got to have the truth. I got to be free. I got to know. I got to be healed. You have to take it by force. You have to seize it. You have to crowd in. You have to press in. That's what they used to always say in the old days. Press into God, right? Press into him. I got one more in Mark 10. Mark chapter 10, verse 46 through 52. This is about a man named Bartimaeus. He was blind. Look what this says. Mark 10, 46 through 52. Then they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a large crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus the Nazarene, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many were sternly telling him to be quiet, but he kept crying out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stopped and said, "Call him here." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, stand up, he is calling for you." Throwing aside his cloak, he jumped up and came to Jesus, and answering him, Jesus said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to him, "Rabboni, Rabboni, Rabboni, I want to regain my sight." And Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and began following him on the road. This man was blind, but he heard Jesus was coming and he started to shout. And even when he started to shout, the disciples and everybody else said, "Keep quiet." But he didn't. He just aggressively, by force, and violently shouted even louder. He was not going to take no for an answer. He was pressing in. He was going to get his sight. He was going to see by the end of this yelling and screaming that he was going to get from Jesus what he came for. I think the importance of this can't be overstated. You know, my own experience of getting born again, transformed by Christ, was that me and my wife had divorced and been divorced for 2 years. We had started talking a little bit. I started attending the same church she was attending after this 2 years, and I thought we were going to get our relationship straightened out. I thought we were going to get back together. This was going to get fixed. She didn't see it that way, but there was one fateful night during a revival meeting, and I turned to her and I said, "Do you want to go to the altar and pray about our relationship?" She agreed to go to the altar, although she didn't see a relationship coming. But in that moment, I already knew, even if she said no, even if she didn't come to the altar with me, I was going, because me and God had to get something settled. I had to get something settled with him. Me as an individual, as a grown person, 30 years old, had to come to some conclusions. Me and God had to wrestle this thing out. You know, just like Jacob in the Old Testament, he was wrestling with this man all night long, and he would not let him go till his hip was out of place. He simply wouldn't let him go. This is what God is after. Jesus knows that only the desperate are going to receive who he is. The good news is that as time goes by, and as wickedness increases, and the love of many grow cold, and it gets more and more dangerous and terroristic and fearful in the world, the more people will be driven to this desperation. And they will cry out like the blind man. They will press through like the woman with the issue of blood. And they will not be offended and run away by any insults or by what anyone else says, but they will stay right there until they get the bread crumbs from the table, if that's what it takes. Whew. We're in an amazing time to be alive, folks, and I pray that you would get aggressive about your grabbing hold of the kingdom, because that's what it's going to take. The kingdom suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you on the next Louie File. See you then.